The Great Hall of the Galactic Concord stretched for nearly 2 kilometers in every direction. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath the glass dome. 847 species had sent their representatives to this place for over 12,000 years. Wars had ended here. Alliances had formed. Empires had risen and fallen while this hall remained standing. Today, the hall was full. Every seat was taken. Every observer gallery was packed. Word had spread through the diplomatic channels that humanity was going to make some kind of announcement. Most species came to watch out of curiosity. A few came to laugh. Humanity had only been part of the Concord for 73 years. They were still considered children by galactic standards. Ambassador Yellen Okonkwo stood at the central platform. She was a tall woman with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen much in her 64 years of life. Behind her stood 3 human officers in formal military dress. They carried no weapons. They showed no emotion. They simply waited. The Speaker of the Assembly, a massive crystalline being called Vorthax, who had held the position for 3 centuries, gestured for silence. The noise of 800 species slowly faded to quiet. "The representative of Earth and the human colonies may speak," Vorthax announced. Yellen stepped forward. She did not use notes. She did not look nervous. She spoke clearly and slowly so the translation systems could keep up. "Honored members of the Galactic Concord," she began, "I come before you today to deliver a formal warning. This warning is being recorded and will be stored in the permanent archives of this assembly. I want there to be no confusion about what I am about to say." A few murmurs passed through the crowd. Warnings were rare in this hall. Usually they came from powerful empires threatening smaller species. No one could remember the last time a young species had delivered one. "For the past 18 months, Yellen continued, the Kreth Dominion has been moving military forces toward human colonial space. 14 fleet groups now sit within striking distance of our outer worlds. We have requested explanation through diplomatic channels. We have received none. We have requested that these forces withdraw. They have not." In the section reserved for the Kreth Dominion, the insectoid delegates shifted in their seats. Their ambassador, a massive creature with 4 arms and mandibles that could crush steel, made a sound that might have been laughter. "Therefore," Yellen said, "I am here to deliver humanity's response to this threat, and I want every species in this hall to hear it clearly." She paused. The hall was completely silent now. "If the Kreth Dominion attacks any human world, any human ship, or any human citizen, we will respond with the complete extinction of the Kreth species. Not defeat, not occupation, extinction. Every Kreth on every world will die. Their civilization will end. Their history will become archaeology. This is not a negotiating position. This is not an opening offer. This is a promise." For a long moment, no one moved. Then the Kreth ambassador rose from his seat. His laughter echoed through the hall, a harsh clicking sound that made several nearby species flinch. "The soft mammals threaten us," he said. "You who have colonized 40 worlds dare to threaten the Kreth Dominion? We control 3,000 worlds. Our warriors number in the trillions. Your species is barely out of your cradle, and you speak of extinction?" Other species began to join in the laughter. The Torvak, a warrior race allied with the Kreth, stamped their feet in mockery. The Jellian delegation, who had never liked humanity's rapid expansion, whispered jokes to each other, but not everyone laughed. In the upper galleries, the Velkari observers sat in perfect stillness. They were the oldest species still active in galactic affairs. Their civilization had existed for over 1,000,000 years. They had watched countless younger species rise and fall. They had seen empires that seemed unstoppable crumble to dust, and they had learned to watch for signs that others missed. Elder Kaleth, the senior Velkari observer, studied the human ambassador carefully. The woman showed no reaction to the laughter, no anger, no embarrassment, no fear. She simply waited for silence to return, as patient as stone. This troubled Kaleth greatly. When the laughter finally faded, Yellen spoke again. "I did not come here to convince you. I did not come here to debate. I came here to warn you, so that when the consequence falls, no one can say they were not told. The Kreth Dominion has been warned. This assembly has witnessed it. My duty is complete. The Kreth ambassador stepped forward, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of contempt. I reject your warning, human. The Kreth Dominion does not bow to threats from lesser species. If we choose to take your worlds, we will take them, and your species will learn what happens to prey that forgets its place. Several other delegations voiced their support for the Kreth. The chamber filled with shouting. The speaker called for order multiple times before silence returned. Does humanity have anything else to say? Vorthax asked. Yellen shook her head. No, the warning has been delivered. We ask only that the assembly formally note its existence in the records. That seems unnecessary, said the delegate from the Jellian Combine. This warning is clearly empty posturing. Recording it would only embarrass humanity further when the truth becomes clear. I insist, Yellen said calmly. A vote was called. Most species voted against recording the warning. They saw no point in preserving what they viewed as the foolish threat of a young species that did not understand its place in the galaxy. Yellen accepted the result with a slight nod. I thank the Assembly for witnessing this moment. Whatever comes next, know that you are here. You heard the warning. You made your choice. She turned and walked out of the hall. Her officers followed without a word. In the upper gallery, Elder Kalith turned to his fellow Velkari. Something is wrong, he said quietly. Wrong how? Asked Elder Mithray. The humans are clearly outmatched. Their threat is empty. Is it? Kalith asked. Look at how she walked out. No anger, no frustration, no desperate last attempt to be believed. She delivered her message and left, like someone who had completed a task. Like someone who knew exactly what was going to happen next and had made peace with it. Mithray considered this. You think the humans actually have some weapon capable of destroying the Kreth? I think, Kalith said slowly, that in my 800 years of watching younger species, I have never seen someone deliver a death threat with such perfect calm. Bluffs look different. Desperation looks different. What I saw in that woman's eyes was certainty. Below them, the Kreth delegation was celebrating. They had publicly humiliated humanity. They had shown the galaxy that the new species could be pushed around. Already, the Kreth ambassador was sending messages to his homeworld, recommending that the attack proceed as planned. 3 weeks passed. On the human colony world of New Valencia, life continued as normal. Children went to school, farmers tended their crops, ships came and went from the orbital stations, carrying goods to and from other human worlds. Maria Santos was 12 years old. She lived with her parents and younger brother in a small town near the southern mountains. Her father worked in the mining operations. Her mother was a teacher. Maria wanted to be a starship pilot when she grew up. On the morning of April 17th, she was eating breakfast when the sky turned white. The Kreth came without warning. 12 human worlds were hit simultaneously. The attackers used orbital bombardment, ground troops, and chemical weapons. They did not come to conquer. They came to punish. They came to teach humanity a lesson about threatening their betters. New Valencia burned. The capital city was gone in the first 5 minutes. The smaller towns lasted a little longer. Maria's family made it to the emergency shelter beneath their home. They huddled in the dark, listening to explosions above them, wondering if they would survive. They did not. The shelter was not deep enough. When the Kreth ground forces swept through the area, they found it and broke through the door. Maria's father tried to fight. Her mother tried to reason with them. Neither approach worked. Maria was the last to die. She did not understand why this was happening. She had never hurt anyone. She just wanted to fly starships. Across 12 worlds, 2.3 million humans died in the first hour of the attack. On Earth, in a command center buried deep beneath the mountains of Switzerland, Fleet Admiral Kofi Asante received the reports. Each one was worse than the last. Cities destroyed. Populations massacred. Children murdered in their schools. Around him, his staff worked in controlled silence. No one panicked. No one wept. They had trained for this. They had prepared for this. They had hoped it would never come, but they had always known it might. Asante read the final casualty estimate, then set down the report. He looked at his staff, at the men and women who would carry out the next orders. Begin Operation Consequence, he said quietly. Throughout human space, In hidden stations and secret shipyards, machines that had waited for decades began to wake up. Ships that no one in the galaxy knew existed powered their engines for the first time. Weapons that had been built in secret, tested in secret, and hidden in secret were armed and ready. Humanity had warned them. Now humanity would teach them why the warning should have been believed. The galaxy watched humanity die. Every major news network across the Concord carried the footage. Kreth warships burning human cities. Kreth soldiers marching through the ruins. Human refugees fleeing in ships that were shot down before they could escape. It was, according to most commentators, exactly what everyone had expected. The humans brought this upon themselves, said a Jellian news anchor. Their foolish threat in the assembly hall left the Kreth no choice but to respond with force. Perhaps the survivors will learn humility. A predictable outcome, agreed a Torvak military analyst. The humans were never a serious power. Their warning was nothing but empty words. Now they pay the price for their arrogance. In the Velkari observation stations, Elder Keleth watched the coverage in silence. Something still felt wrong to him, but he could not explain what. The humans were clearly losing. 3 more colony worlds had fallen in the week since the first attack. The Kreth fleet was advancing steadily toward the core human systems. And yet, the human government had not surrendered. They had not begged for peace. They had not asked the Concord for help. They had simply gone quiet. Their ambassador had been recalled from the assembly. Their trading ships had stopped arriving at galactic ports. It was as if humanity had closed itself off from the rest of the galaxy. Perhaps they are ashamed, suggested Elder Mithri. They made a grand threat and could not back it up. Now they hide while they die. Perhaps, Caleth said, but he did not believe it. On the 14th day after the first attack, something changed. The Kreth battle group advancing on the human colony of New Brisbane detected an anomaly in the space ahead of them. Sensors showed a gravitational disturbance, like something massive was there but could not be seen. The fleet commander, a veteran officer named Krathvor, ordered his ships to slow down. He did not like anomalies. In his 40 years of service, anomalies had always meant trouble. "Can you identify the source?" he asked his sensor operators. "Negative, Commander. We are reading gravitational displacement consistent with a large mass, but there is nothing visible on any spectrum." Krathvor considered his options. He could go around the anomaly. That would add 2 days to their travel time, or he could push through and hope it was natural phenomenon. He was still considering when space itself seemed to tear open. Ships emerged from nowhere. Not a few ships, not a small defensive fleet. Thousands of ships appearing from what looked like holes in reality itself. They were sleek and dark, covered in angles that made them hard to look at directly. They were not like any human ships in the galactic database. "Where did they come from?" Krathvor demanded. "Humans do not have cloaking technology. They do not have dimensional drives. This is impossible." Before anyone could answer, the human fleet opened fire. The battle lasted less than an hour. Krathvor's fleet was destroyed completely. Not a single Kreth ship escaped. The humans did not attempt to communicate. They did not demand surrender. They simply killed everything that wore Kreth colors. When news of the battle reached the Kreth homeworld, it was dismissed as exaggeration. One battle group destroyed by a hidden human fleet? Unfortunate, but not significant. The Kreth had hundreds of battle groups. They could afford to lose one. Then they lost another, and another. Over the next 3 days, 17 Kreth battle groups were destroyed. They were not defeated. They were erased. No survivors. No distress calls. Just silence where Kreth fleets used to be. The Kreth High Command finally began to take the situation seriously. They ordered all offensive operations to halt. They pulled their remaining fleets back to defensive positions. They tried to understand what was happening. That was when the human fleet appeared above their agricultural worlds. The planet Krethful Prime was the breadbasket of the Dominion. Its farms fed 100 billion Kreth across 3,000 worlds. It had no military value. It had no defenses. It was just farmland and farmers and the processing centers that turned crops into food. 3,000 human ships took position in orbit. The Kreth military scrambled to respond. Fleets were redirected. Commands were shouted. Confusion spread as officers tried to understand the human strategy. Why attack a farming world? What was the point? Then humanity sent its message. It was broadcast on all frequencies, in all languages, to every Kreth world simultaneously. The speaker was a human male in military uniform. His voice was calm and cold. To the Kreth Dominion, you were warned. You attacked anyway. You killed 2.3 million of our people, children, families, people who had never harmed you. Now you will learn that humanity does not make empty threats. We gave you a warning. You chose not to believe it. That choice has consequences. You have 72 hours to return every Kreth fleet to your borders. Not just the fleets attacking us, all of them. Every warship in your dominion returns home and stays there. If this condition is not met in 72 hours, we will begin. Begin what, you may ask? You will see. You have 72 hours. The message ended. The Kreth High Command met an emergency session. Some argued for immediate compliance. Others insisted this was still a bluff. The humans had shown unexpected military strength, yes, but they could not possibly destroy the entire Dominion. Their threat of extinction was still fantasy. The debate raged for hours. In the end, the war faction won. The Kreth would not bow to mammals. They would reinforce their positions. They would rebuild their fleets. They would crush humanity with overwhelming force. 72 hours passed. At hour 73, the human fleet above Krethful Prime fired, but they did not use weapons that the galaxy understood. No explosions lit the sky. No kinetic strikes crashed into the surface. Instead, the ships released what looked like clouds of fine dust. The dust fell through the atmosphere, spreading across the entire planet in a matter of minutes. On the surface, farmers looked up at the strange clouds. Some ran for shelter. Some stood and watched, confused. It did not matter. Within seconds of the dust touching them, they simply stopped. They did not scream. They did not fall. They just stopped moving, stopped breathing, stopped existing as living things. Their bodies remained standing for a moment, then collapsed into piles of organic matter that had no structure, no organization, no life. The dust spread across the entire planet. It entered buildings. It found underground shelters. It touched every Kreth on that world, and every Kreth it touched died. 890 million Kreth, gone in less than an hour. The buildings remained. The crops kept growing. The animals that Kreth farmers had raised continued eating and sleeping and living. Only the Kreth were dead. Only the Kreth. 2 other agricultural worlds died at the same time. The same dust, the same result. Nearly 3 billion Kreth erased from existence in a single coordinated strike. The galactic news networks fell silent. No one knew what to say. In the Velkari observation stations, Elder Kaleth closed his eyes and took a long breath. He had seen civilizations fall before. He had watched species destroy each other in wars of hatred and greed, but he had never seen anything like this. The humans had created a weapon that could target a single species and leave everything else untouched. They had built it in secret. They had tested it in secret. They had waited until they needed it. "What is that weapon?" Elder Mithray asked, his voice trembling. "I believe," Kaleth said quietly, "it is a genetic dissolution agent, species-specific. It breaks down the unique biological structures of Kreth cells and nothing else. Everything that is Kreth becomes nothing. Everything that is not Kreth is untouched. That is impossible. Such technology would require complete genetic mapping of the target species. It would require decades of secret research." "Yes," Kaleth agreed, "it would." Mithray stared at him. "How long have the humans had this capability?" Kaleth did not answer. He did not need to. They both understood now. The humans had not built this weapon in response to the Kreth attack. They had built it long before. Perhaps they had built similar weapons for every species in the Conquered. Perhaps every member of the Assembly was already marked for death if they threatened humanity. The warning had not been a bluff. The warning had been a mercy. On the Kreth homeworld, chaos reigned. The High Command had gone silent. Military units were refusing orders. Civilians were fleeing to the countryside, as if distance would save them from a weapon that fell from the sky. The war faction was gone. Everyone who had argued for continued fighting was dead, killed by their own people in a desperate attempt to satisfy humanity's demands. A new government formed within hours. They sent a message to the human fleet, begging for peace. They would recall their fleets. They would pay reparations. They would do anything humanity wanted. The response came within minutes. You were warned. You attacked. Now there are consequences. You do not get to choose when the consequences end. We do. The message was followed by coordinates. 3 more Kreth worlds. 3 more agricultural planets. The next targets. The Kreth had 48 hours to consider what they had done. And across the galaxy, every species that had ever thought about attacking humanity began to realize that the soft mammals from Earth were not what they seemed. They were not kind. They were not gentle. They were not easy prey. They were something far more dangerous. They were patient. They were prepared. And they kept their promises. Panic spread through the galactic concord like fire through dry grass. Within days of the Kreth agricultural worlds going silent, every major species had called emergency meetings. Military commanders demanded information. Politicians demanded explanations. Scientists struggled to understand what humanity had done and how they had done it. The Velkari were the first to request formal clarification. Elder Calith traveled personally to the human embassy on the neutral station of Concordance Prime. He expected to find the building closed and empty, like all other human facilities in Concord space. Instead, he found Ambassador Yelena Okonkwo waiting for him. She looked older than she had in the assembly hall. The gray in her hair seemed more pronounced. Her eyes carried a weight that had not been there before, but she still showed no fear, no regret, only a deep and terrible certainty. Elder Calith, she said, I wondered when your people would come. Ambassador. Calith settled into the chair across from her. His ancient bones creaked as he moved. The galaxy has questions. I know. They want to understand what you have done, what weapon you have used, how you created it. I know that too. Calith waited. Yellen poured tea from a pot on her desk. She offered him a cup. He took it, though his species did not drink. The weapon is called a species-specific genetic dissolution agent, Yellen said. We call it the Quiet Death. It targets the unique genetic markers that define a species. It breaks down those markers at the cellular level. Everything that makes a Kreth simply stops working. The process is fast, it is painless, and it is completely irreversible. How long have you possessed this capability? For the Kreth specifically? About 40 years. We began mapping their genome shortly after first contact. Calith felt something cold move through him. 40 years. The humans had been preparing to destroy the Kreth for 40 years, even as they traded with them, even as they sat in the same assembly hall. And for other species? He asked carefully. Yellen met his eyes without blinking. We have complete genetic profiles for every species in the Concord. We have developed quiet death variants for 412 of them. The rest are still in testing. We prioritize based on threat assessment. The Velkari. Your variant has been complete for 37 years. We considered you a priority because of your influence in galactic affairs. Calith set down his tea. His hands were not shaking. He had lived too long for that. But he understood now why he had felt such unease watching the human ambassador deliver her warning. He had been looking at someone who could kill his entire species with a single command. Why, he asked, why build such weapons? Why prepare for extinction-level war before anyone had threatened you? Yellen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than before. Have you studied human history, Elder? Some. Your species is young. Your history is short. Short, Yellen agreed, but not gentle. She activated a display on her desk. Images appeared. Cities burning. Bodies piled in pits. Soldiers standing over the dead. These are from our past. A genocide on a continent called Africa. Another in Europe. Another in Asia. Millions dead because they belonged to the wrong tribe, the wrong nation, the wrong religion. Calith studied the images. He had seen similar things before. Young species were often violent. They usually grew out of it. These are more recent, Yellen continued. New images appeared. A mushroom cloud rising over a city. We developed weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single blast. We pointed these weapons at each other. For decades, Our species stood on the edge of self-destruction, held back only by the knowledge that using the weapons would mean everyone would die. But you did not use them. No, we learned. We studied ourselves. We came to understand what we were capable of when we felt threatened, when we felt cornered, when we felt that our survival was at stake. Yellen turned off the display. We are not a peaceful species, Elder. We are a dangerous species that has learned to control its danger. There is a difference. So you built extinction weapons as a deterrent. Yes, we hoped we would never need to use them. We hoped the threat alone would be enough. We warned the Kreth clearly. We gave them every chance to stop. They chose to attack anyway. They chose to kill our children. They chose extinction. Kaleth considered this. And now? Will you complete their extinction? That depends on them, and on the galaxy. What do you mean? Yellen stood and walked to the window. Outside, ships from a dozen species moved through the station's docking bays. Life continued, even as one species faced annihilation. We delivered a warning, she said. We promised extinction for any species that attacked us. The Kreth attacked. Now we must follow through, or the warning means nothing. If we show mercy now, every aggressive species in the galaxy will know that human threats are empty. They will test us. They will attack. And we will have to use the quiet death again and again until no one doubts us anymore. So you will complete the extinction. We will destroy enough of them to make the lesson clear. How much enough depends on what happens next. The Kreth have recalled their fleets. Their government has surrendered. They are begging for peace. Perhaps that is enough. Perhaps we can stop before every last Kreth is dead. Kaleth rose from his chair. What would make you stop? Yellen turned to face him. Acknowledgement. Not from the Kreth, from the galaxy. Every species in the Concord must understand what we are and what we will do to protect ourselves. They must believe it. If the galaxy learns the lesson, the Kreth can survive. Reduced, controlled, but alive. And if the galaxy does not learn, then we will make an example that no one will ever forget. Kyleth left the embassy and returned to his ship. He had much to report. The Velkari Council would need to decide how to respond. Many would call for humanity to be destroyed, somehow, before they became an even greater threat. But Kaleth knew that was impossible now. The humans had prepared too well. Any attack on them would trigger the same response the Kreth had received. Humanity had changed the rules of the galaxy in a single moment. They had proven that a young species, properly prepared, could stand against any threat. They had proven that warnings should be believed. On the Kreth homeworld, the new government waited for death. Every Kreth knew that human ships hung above their colonies. Every Kreth knew that the dust could fall at any moment. They had stopped going outside. They had stopped making plans for the future. They simply waited. The High Council met in continuous session. Some members had fled underground. Others had killed themselves rather than wait for the quiet death. Those who remained debated endlessly about what could be done. We should surrender completely, said Councillor Vreth. Accept any terms. Give humanity whatever they want. Perhaps they will spare us. They have already rejected our surrender, said Councillor Krath. They said we do not get to choose when the consequences end. They do. Then we are already dead. We should accept that and spend our final days with our families. No. A new voice spoke. The youngest member of the council, barely into adulthood by Kreth standards. His name was Threk, and he had voted against the war from the beginning. There is one option we have not tried. What option? We have tried everything. We have begged for mercy. We have offered surrender. We have promised to do whatever they want. But we have not done the one thing that might actually move them. What is that? Threk stood. His forearms hung at his sides. He looked exhausted, like he had not slept in days. We should acknowledge what we did, he said. Not just to humanity, to everyone. We should broadcast to the entire galaxy that we were wrong, that we attacked civilians, that we killed children, that we ignored a clear warning because we thought we were superior. We should confess our crimes and accept whatever judgment follows. Silence filled the chamber. That would be humiliating, Councillor Vreth said finally. Yes, Threk agreed. It would be. But humanity's ambassadors said they want acknowledgement. They want the galaxy to understand. If we help them achieve that goal, Perhaps they will see value in keeping us alive. As an example, as proof that their warnings work, the council debated for hours. In the end, desperation won over pride. The next day, the Kreth government broadcast a message to every species in the Concord. It was a full confession. They admitted to attacking civilian targets. They admitted to ignoring a clear warning. They admitted that they had thought humans were weak and had learned at terrible cost that they were wrong. The message ended with a plea. Not for mercy. The Kreth knew they did not deserve mercy. Instead, they asked the galaxy to learn from their mistake, to believe human warnings, to never assume that a young species could not destroy an old one. It was the most humiliating moment in Kreth history. It might also be what saved them. In the Human Command Center, Admiral Kofi Asante watched the Kreth broadcast with his senior staff. When it ended, no one spoke. They admitted it, said Colonel Chen. Everything, publicly. Yes, Asante agreed. Does that change anything? Asante was quiet for a long moment. He thought about the dead on New Valencia, about the children who would never grow up, about the families who had been erased because the Kreth thought humans were weak. It changes something, he said finally. I don't know if it changes enough, but it's something. He turned to his communications officer. Send a message to Earth. Tell them the Kreth have made a public confession. Tell them it might be time to consider alternatives to complete extinction. What kind of alternatives, sir? Asante shook his head. That's above my pay grade. I just kill enemies. What happens after they stop being enemies is for the politicians to decide. The message went out. Across human space, leaders began to debate a question none of them had expected to face. Was there a way to make the Kreth pay for their crimes without killing every last one of them? And in the deep black between the stars, the Kreth fleet that had been recalled to the homeworld sat idle, their weapons powered down. They were still the largest military force in the galaxy. They still had more ships than humanity could count. But all their power meant nothing now. They had attacked a species that did not bluff, and now they waited to learn if their species would survive. The debate on Earth lasted for 11 days. Every government on the planet sent representatives. Every human colony world participated through quantum links. Scientists presented data. Ethicists presented arguments. Military commanders presented assessments. And through it all, one question dominated. Should humanity complete the extinction of the Kreth, or was there another way? The case for extinction was simple. Humanity had made a promise. They had warned the galaxy that attacking them meant death. If they showed mercy now, that warning would lose its power. Other species would test them. More humans would die. The only way to ensure permanent safety was to eliminate the Kreth completely and prove that human threats were absolute. The case against extinction was more complicated. Yes, they had made a promise. Yes, they needed the galaxy to believe their warnings. But killing an entire species, even a species that had murdered millions of humans, was something that could not be undone. It would change humanity forever. They would become the species that had committed genocide. That identity would follow them for the rest of their existence. In the end, it was a compromise that won. The Kreth would not be extinguished. Instead, they would be transformed. Their military would be disbanded. Their government would be dissolved. Human administrators would take control of their worlds and oversee a complete restructuring of their society. The process would take generations. The Kreth who had ordered the attack on humanity would face justice. The Kreth who had carried out the attacks would face justice. But the Kreth as a species would survive. The galaxy received this decision with relief and fear. Relief that humanity had shown some restraint. Fear of what that restraint cost the Kreth. But the Kreth High Command did not accept the decision. They had been hiding since the First Worlds went silent. The generals and admirals who had pushed for war, the politicians who had laughed at human warnings, the strategists who had promised easy victory, they had all gone underground. They had hidden in bunkers meant to survive asteroid strikes. They had watched as their governments surrendered, as their people confessed, as their species begged for mercy, and they had refused to accept it. Supreme Commander Krathzol, the architect of the attack on humanity, gathered the remaining war faction in a bunker beneath the southern continent of the Kreth homeworld. Around him stood the last believers in Kreth supremacy. Their numbers had shrunk. Many had been killed by their own people, sacrificed in desperate attempts to satisfy humanity. But enough remained. We will not die like animals, Krasil said. We will not watch our civilization dismantled by mammals. If the Kreth must end, we will end on our terms. What do you propose? Asked one of his admirals. We have 14,000 warships still operational. Our crews remain loyal to the true Dominion, not to the traitors who surrendered. The humans have most of their fleet positioned around our colony worlds. Their homeworld, this Earth, is defended by a smaller force. You want to attack Earth? I want to destroy it. Every human city, every human life. If we die, they die with us. The galaxy will remember that the Kreth were not victims. We were warriors until the end. The officers around him exchanged glances. Some showed doubt. Others showed the fierce loyalty of true believers. In the end, enough of them agreed. The attack was launched in secret. 14,000 Kreth warships, hidden in deep space since the recall order, powered their engines and began the long journey to human space. They did not tell their families. They did not leave messages. They simply flew toward Earth, knowing they would not return. Human intelligence detected the fleet 3 days before it reached Seoul. Admiral Asante received the report in his command center. He read it twice, then set it down carefully on his desk. 14,000 ship, he said. Yes, sir. They bypassed our detection grid by taking a non-standard route through the outer systems. Current trajectory puts them at Earth in 73 hours. Do we have enough ships to stop them? Unknown, sir. Most of our fleet is still positioned in Kreth space. We can recall them, but they will not arrive in time. Earth's home fleet numbers approximately 12,000 combat vessels. So we will be outnumbered. Yes, sir, but not by much. Asani stood and walked to the display showing the approaching fleet. 14,000 ships carrying the last true believers of Kreth supremacy. They knew they were going to die. They did not care. They wanted to take humanity with them. Recall the fleet anyway, Asante ordered, and broadcast a general alert to all human worlds. The Kreth are making their final play. The next 70 hours were the longest in human history. On Earth, cities went on high alert. Emergency shelters opened, military units mobilized. People said goodbye to their loved ones just in case. No one knew exactly what would happen when the Kreth arrived, but everyone understood that this was the final battle. The human home fleet assembled in orbit, 12,000 ships ranging from massive carriers to nimble fighters. They formed a defensive sphere around Earth, waiting for the enemy to arrive. And then the Kreth came. They emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 14,000 warships, all of them aimed at the blue marble hanging in space. Their weapons were armed. Their shields were at maximum. They were here to die, but they intended to take Earth with them. The battle began. Human ships surged forward to meet the attack. The space between the fleets filled with weapons fire, missiles, energy beams, kinetic projectiles. Ships on both sides exploded. Debris scattered across millions of kilometers. The fighting was brutal and desperate, but humanity had one advantage the Kreth did not expect: reinforcements. Ships began arriving from across human space. Not the main fleet, still days away, but reserve forces that had been hidden in nearby systems. Armed freighters converted for war. Mining vessels carrying improvised weapons. Research ships with experimental technology. They came by the dozens, then by the hundreds, then by the thousands. The Kreth found themselves facing not 12,000 ships, but over 40,000. Commander Krath Zal watched his fleet die. Ship after ship, destroyed by enemies that should not have been there. His tactical displays showed the hopelessness of the situation. The humans had prepared for this. They had hidden forces. They had anticipated the attack. We will not break through, his admiral reported. Their defensive line is too strong. Krathzol felt something cold settle in his chest. He had hoped to destroy Earth. He had dreamed of watching human cities burn. Instead, he would die in the dark between worlds, accomplishing nothing. Continue the attack, he ordered. Fight until the last ship is gone. The battle lasted 11 hours. When it was over, not a single Kreth warship remained. 14,000 ships had been reduced to debris. The human fleet had suffered heavy losses, nearly 8,000 ships destroyed, but Earth was safe. On the surface, people emerged from their shelters and looked up at the sky. They could see the flashes of light where ships had died. They knew that thousands of humans had given their lives to protect them. They also knew that the war was finally over. Admiral Asante surveyed the aftermath from his command ship. Around him, rescue operations were underway. Survivors were being pulled from damaged vessels. The dead were being counted. It would take weeks to fully account for the losses. "Sir," his communications officer said, "message from Earth Command. They want to know if we should proceed with the planned occupation of Kreth space." Asante was quiet for a moment. The Kreth who had attacked Earth were dead. The Kreth who remained had not supported this assault. They had surrendered. They had confessed. They had tried to stop the war faction. "Yes," he said finally. "Proceed as planned. The occupation begins immediately." But there was one more thing to decide. On the Kreth homeworld, human ships now hung in orbit. The planetary government, such as it was, waited for instructions. They had not supported Krathzol's attack. They had tried to warn humanity about the war faction's plans. But they knew that none of that might matter. Humanity had promised extinction. Perhaps the final attack had sealed their fate. Instead, a shuttle descended from the human fleet. It landed outside the capital city. A single figure emerged. Commander David Achebe walked across the scorched ground toward the waiting Kreth delegation. He was a young man, only 32 years old. His family had died on New Valencia in the initial attack. His parents, his sister, his nephew, who was only 4 years old. He had been given the honor of delivering humanity's final message to the Kreth. The Kreth leaders knelt before him, not because they were ordered to, because they had nothing left. Their pride was gone. Their fleet was destroyed. Their future was in the hands of the species they had tried to exterminate. "Rise," Achebe said. His voice was steady. He had practiced this moment 1,000 times in his mind. The Kreth stood slowly. Their compound eyes reflected the human ships above. "The Kreth species will survive," Achebe said. "This is not mercy. This is a choice. We could destroy you. We still can. But we have decided that destroying you would make us into something we do not want to be." He paused. The Kreth waited. "Instead, you will change. Your military is dissolved. Your government is dissolved. Human administrators will oversee your worlds until we are satisfied that you have become something other than what you were. Your children will learn our history. They will understand what their ancestors did and why it was wrong. Generation by generation, the Kreth will be transformed." "And if we refuse?" one of the Kreth leaders asked. Achebe looked at him. "You will not refuse. You have seen what we can do. You know we can end you at any moment. You will accept these terms because the alternative is extinction. And somewhere, deep down, you want your species to survive, even if it means changing everything you are." The Kreth leader bowed his head. There was nothing else to say. Commander Achebe turned and walked back to his shuttle. As he boarded, he thought about his family. His mother's smile, his father's laugh, his nephew's endless questions about why the sky was blue. They were gone. Nothing would bring them back. But perhaps in the generations to come, Kreth children would learn about New Valencia. They would learn what their ancestors had done, and they would understand why it could never happen again. That was not justice, but it was something. And for now, something would have to be enough. 10 years had passed since the war. The Kreth homeworld looked different now. Human buildings stood beside Kreth ones. Human vehicles moved through streets that had once known only Kreth traffic. Human teachers worked in schools that had once taught the superiority of the Dominion. The occupation had not been gentle. In the first years, there had been resistance. Kreth who refused to accept human rule. Kreth who believed they could fight back. Kreth who would rather die than submit to mammals. They had died, not from the quiet death, but from conventional military action. The humans did not use their extinction weapons against resistors. They did not need to. The mere knowledge that such weapons existed was enough to keep most Kreth in line. But as the years passed, something unexpected happened. The resistance faded, not because the Kreth were broken, but because they began to change. The children were the key. A generation of Kreth had been born since the war. They had never known the old Dominion. They had never been taught that their species was superior. Instead, they had grown up in schools where human teachers taught alongside reformed Kreth instructors. They learned about Earth's history, its wars and genocides, its struggles and triumphs. They learned about New Valencia and the other colonies that had burned. And they learned why the war had happened and how close their species had come to total extinction. These children did not hate humans. They did not fear them. They simply saw them as another species, different but not lesser, not greater, just different. In the capital city, a young Kreth named Thel walked through a garden that had been built in the years since the occupation. The garden was unusual. Half of it was filled with plants from the Kreth homeworld. The other half was filled with flowers from Earth. The two sections grew side by side, neither strangling the other. Thel was 8 years old by human counting. She had been born 2 years after the war ended. Her parents had survived the conflict, barely. Her father had been a minor official in the old government. Her mother had been a farmer on one of the agricultural worlds, though she had been off-world visiting family when the quiet death fell. Thel did not remember the war. She only knew it from history lessons and from the quiet sadness that sometimes filled her parents' eyes when they looked at the sky. Today she was here for a class trip. Her teacher, a human woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, had brought them to see the Memorial of the Fallen. It was a simple structure, a wall of black stone with names carved into it. On one side, the names of Kreth who had died in the war. On the other side, the names of humans. Both lists were very long. Thel stood before the wall and tried to count the names. She gave up after a few minutes. There were too many. Why did they fight? She asked Dr. Chen. The teacher knelt beside her. She was getting older now, gray in her hair, lines around her eyes. She had been one of the first humans to volunteer for the reconstruction effort. She had spent 10 years teaching Kreth children. Because your ancestors thought humans were weak, Dr. Chen said. They thought they could attack us without consequence. They were wrong. But why did they think that? Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment. Have you ever been afraid of something, Thel? Really afraid? Thel thought about it. I was afraid of the dark when I was little. I thought there were monsters in my room. What did you do about it? My mother showed me that there were no monsters. She turned on the light and we looked everywhere together. Dr. Chen nodded. Your ancestors were afraid too. They had been the strongest species in their part of the galaxy for a long time. When humans arrived, we were different. We were from a harsher world. We had strange customs. We did not fit into their understanding of how the galaxy worked. That scared them. So they attacked because they were scared? Partly. They also attacked because they had never met a species they could not defeat. They assumed humans would be the same. They assumed we would surrender or die. They never imagined we might be ready for them. Thel looked at the wall of names. My mother says there used to be billions more of us. Before the war. Yes, many Kreth died. Many humans died too. The war was terrible for everyone. Then why didn't your people just destroy us? They could have, right? They had the weapons. Dr. Chen sat down on a bench near the memorial. Thel climbed up beside her. The garden was quiet around them. Other children from the class were exploring different sections, supervised by other teachers. Yes, we could have destroyed you, Dr. Chen said. We came very close. Many humans wanted to. They had lost family, friends, entire communities. They wanted revenge. What stopped them? A choice. We had to decide what kind of species we wanted to be. We could be destroyers, the species that wiped out another civilization, or we could try something harder. We could try to change you instead of killing you. We chose the harder path. Why? Dr. Chen smiled slightly. Because killing is easy, changing is hard, and humans, for all our faults, do not like easy answers. Thel considered this. It was a lot to think about for someone her age, but she was used to difficult ideas. Her teachers never treated her like she was too young to understand important things. Do you think we have changed? She asked. The Kreth, I mean. What do you think? Thel looked around the garden. She saw Kreth and humans walking together. She saw children playing games that mixed traditions from both species. She saw flowers from two worlds growing in the same soil. I think maybe we are changing, she said. I do not want to attack anyone. My friends do not either. We just want to learn things and have adventures and maybe see other worlds someday. That sounds like a good future. But what about the humans? The ones who lost family in the war? Do they hate us still? Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Some do. That is understandable. When you lose people you love, it leaves a wound that never fully heals. But many others have chosen to move forward. They believe that punishing children for the crimes of their ancestors is not justice. It is just more cruelty. My father says humans are strange. He says you are very kind and very dangerous at the same time. Your father is a wise Kreth. Both things are true. We are kind because we want to be. We are dangerous because we have to be. The galaxy is not always a gentle place. They sat together in the garden as the sun moved across the sky. Eventually, the other children gathered, and it was time to leave. But before they went, Thel had one more question. Dr. Chen, will humans ever really trust us? The Kreth? Dr. Chen stood and brushed off her clothes. Trust takes time, Thel. It takes generations. But I see you and your friends, and I think that maybe when you are grown, the galaxy will be different. Maybe your children will never know a time when Kreth and humans were enemies. Maybe they will just be neighbors. I would like that. So would I. The class left the garden and boarded their transport back to school. Thel pressed her face to the window and watched the memorial shrink behind them. The wall of names disappeared into the distance. She thought about everything Dr. Chen had said, about fear and choice and the difference between destroying and changing. She did not understand all of it, but she understood enough. Her ancestors had made a terrible mistake. They had attacked a species that did not bluff. They had killed millions of innocents, and they had nearly brought extinction upon themselves. But they had survived. They had been given a second chance. And now it was up to her generation to prove that the second chance had been worth it. Thel did not know what she would be when she grew up. Maybe a scientist, maybe an explorer, maybe a teacher like Dr. Chen. But whatever she became, she would remember the lesson of the war. Warnings should be believed, and mercy when it comes should not be wasted. Far away in the Galactic Concord Assembly, representatives from 847 species gathered for their annual session. Many things had changed in the 10 years since the war. The seating arrangements were different. The balance of power had shifted. And whenever any species spoke of conflict with another, someone would inevitably mention the Kreth. The Kreth were still there, technically. They had observer status now, not full membership. Their representative was a young diplomat named Threk, the same Kreth who had argued for the public confession 10 years before. He was older now, marked by the weight of what he had witnessed. When aggressive species made threats, Threk would sometimes stand and remind them of what had happened to his people. He did not argue. He did not debate. He simply told them the truth. We were the mightiest military power in our region of the galaxy. We had 3,000 worlds and trillions of citizens. We thought we could not be defeated. We attacked humanity because we believed they were weak. We were wrong. Now our dominion is gone. Our fleet is gone. Our independence is gone. We exist at the pleasure of a species we once thought we could crush. He would pause, letting the words sink in. You think you are stronger than they are. You think your weapons are better, your soldiers braver, your strategy superior? That is what we thought too, and now we are a lesson that the galaxy will remember for the next 10,000 years. Usually that ended the discussion. In the upper galleries, Elder Kelleth still watched. He was even older now, nearing the end of his natural lifespan. He had seen many things in his long life, but the rise of humanity remained the most significant event he had ever witnessed. They had come from a small world, violent and divided, barely spacefaring, and in less than a century, they had become the species that every other species feared. Not because they were cruel, not because they were aggressive, but because they had learned the most important lesson that any species could learn. Power means nothing if you are not prepared to use it. And warnings mean nothing if they are not kept. The humans had warned the galaxy. The galaxy had not believed them. Now everyone believed. On Earth, in a small house near the mountains of what had once been called Switzerland, a woman tended her garden. She was old now, her hair white, her movements slow, but her eyes were still sharp. Ambassador Yellen Okonkwo had retired years ago. She had done her duty. She had delivered the warning. She had watched the consequence fall, and she had helped shape the peace that followed. Now she grew flowers, Some were from Earth, some were from other worlds. Some were from Kreth space, seeds sent to her by teachers who wanted to thank her for the choice humanity had made. She knelt in the dirt and planted a new seed. It was a simple act, but it felt important. Life continuing, things growing. The future being built one small piece at a time. Her grandson found her there as the sun began to set. "Grandmother, you should come inside. It is getting cold." "In a moment, David. I want to finish this." He sat on the garden wall and watched her work. He had been named for Commander David Achebe, who had delivered humanity's terms to the Kreth. Achebe had become a family friend over the years. He visited when he could, though his duties kept him busy. "Do you ever regret it?" David asked. "The choice not to destroy them completely?" Yellen pressed the soil around the seed and stood slowly. Her old bones protested, but she ignored them. "Every day," she said, "and never. That does not make sense." "I know, but it is the truth." She wiped her hands on her apron and looked at her grandson. "We lost millions of people, David. Children, families, people who had never harmed anyone. Part of me will always want revenge for that. Part of me will always wish we had finished what we started. But another part of me knows that if we had done that, we would have become something terrible. We would have been the species that committed genocide. That identity would have followed us forever. Instead, we became the species that could have committed genocide, but chose not to. That is a different thing entirely." David thought about this. The galaxy still fears us. Yes, and that fear keeps us safe. But fear is not enough. Eventually, we need something more. Trust, partnership, a galaxy where species work together instead of waiting for someone to attack. That is what we are building with the Kreth. That is why we spared them. Will it work? Yellen looked at the garden around her. Plants from a dozen worlds, growing together in the same soil. It had taken years to figure out how to make them compatible. Many had died before the balance was found, but now they thrived. "I do not know," she said honestly, "but I hope so, and hope is all any of us really have." The sun set behind the mountains. Grandmother and grandson walked inside together, leaving the garden to grow in the darkness. Somewhere far across the galaxy, a Kreth child asked her human teacher why the two species had not destroyed each other. The teacher thought for a long moment before answering. "Because," she said, "saving you was harder than destroying you, and we do not like easy answers." The child nodded, not quite understanding but sensing that the words were important. Someday she would understand fully. Someday she would tell the story to her own children, and the galaxy would remember.